The year is 1772 BC. A Babylonian king named Hammurabi carves 282 laws into a massive column of black diorite stone. Among those laws was this chilling decree: if a man destroys the eye of another man, they shall destroy his eye. And for some crimes, the punishment was simply death. That single column, the Code of Hammurabi, is the oldest surviving record of the death penalty. And from that moment forward, humanity has never stopped arguing about it. Today, the death sentence, capital punishment, is one of the most debated, most ancient, and most globally divided practices in all of human civilization. Some nations execute dozens of people per year. Others abolished it centuries ago. And some countries are quietly reversing course right now, in both directions. In the next few minutes, you will travel with me across 4 millennia of history. You will discover how different civilizations invented, refined, abolished, and in some cases, revived capital punishment. We shall journey from ancient Babylon to Rome, from Imperial China to colonial America. You will learn about the most brutal methods ever devised, and the surprising stories behind those that were created in the name of mercy. You'll find out which country carries out more executions than every other nation on earth combined. And you'll hear the extraordinary true story of a man who survived an execution twice. This is the origin of the death sentence. For anyone to be able to understand the origin of capital punishment, one must first understand something fundamental about ancient societies. Life was cheap, and order was everything. Human rights as we know them today were unheard of. Before professional police forces, before prisons as we know them, governing bodies needed a threat so final, so absolute, that it would deter the worst behavior. And death was that threat. The earliest known written legal code, the Code of Ur-Nammu, written in Sumeria around 2100 BC, already prescribed death for certain offenses: murder, robbery, adultery. But it was Hammurabi's more famous code that cemented a principle we still wrestle with today: that punishment should match the crime. An eye for an eye, a life for a life. In ancient Egypt, capital punishment wasn't just about justice. It was about cosmic order. The Egyptians believed the pharaoh governed on behalf of the gods, and crimes against the state were crimes against the divine universe itself. Offenders could be executed by beheading, drowning, burning, or impalement, depending on the severity of their transgression against Ma'at, the goddess of truth, justice, and cosmic balance. Some criminals were buried alive. Others were fed to crocodiles in the Nile. In ancient Greece, the city of Athens gave us one of history's most famous and troubling examples of capital punishment. In 399 BC, the philosopher Socrates, one of the greatest minds the ancient world ever produced, was put on trial by the Athenian democracy. His crime? Corrupting the youth of Athens and impiety against the gods. He was found guilty by a jury of 500 citizens, and he was sentenced to death by drinking hemlock, a poison. Socrates famously refused to flee and accepted his sentence, drinking the cup calmly, surrounded by his weeping students. The same Greek democracy that invented the jury trial was also willing to execute a man for his ideas. Rome, perhaps more than any civilization before it, turned execution into spectacle. The Romans understood something that authoritarian systems have always understood. Public execution is not just punishment. It is theater. It is a message. Roman methods were deliberate in their cruelty. The condemned could be thrown to wild beasts in the arena, the damnatio ad bestias. They could be crucified along major roads as a warning to travelers and rebels. They could be burned at the stake, or sewn into a sack with a dog, a rooster, a viper, and a monkey, then drowned. A punishment called poena coulae, reserved exclusively for those convicted of killing their own parents. And perhaps the most famous execution in all of human history took place on a hill outside Jerusalem under Roman authority: the crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth. That single act of Roman state punishment would go on to reshape the spiritual and moral landscape of the entire world. Throughout history, humanity has developed a staggering variety of methods for carrying out the death sentence. Each one tells a story about the values of the society that created it, about their technology, their fears, and sometimes their attempts at what they considered compassion. The most widespread method across ancient civilizations was beheading. Quick, decisive, and requiring only a sword or axe. But the quality of the execution depended entirely on the skill, or lack thereof, of the executioner. Historical records from medieval Europe describe botched beheadings requiring multiple blows, sometimes a dozen or more. Hanging emerged as the dominant method in Britain and its colonies from the 13th century onwards. At first, hanging meant exactly what it sounds like: a slow death by strangulation. It wasn't until the 18th century that the long drop method was developed, designed to break the neck instantly. The exact length of the drop had to be calculated based on the condemned person's weight. Too short, and they'd strangle. Too long, and decapitation could occur. And then came the guillotine. Today we associate it with the terror of the French Revolution, with the execution of King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. But here is what almost nobody knows. The guillotine was invented as a humanitarian device. Dr. Joseph-Ignace Guillotin did not actually invent the machine, but he advocated strongly for it in the French National Assembly in 1789. His argument was simple. In a society that must carry out executions, all condemned people, regardless of class or wealth, deserve a quick, painless death. Before the guillotine, wealthy nobles could afford skilled swordsmen, while the poor faced botched hangings and worse. The guillotine was, in theory, democratic, or merciful death. Between 1793 and 1794 alone, the period known as the Reign of Terror, approximately 17,000 people were guillotined in France. The machine that was meant to be merciful became a symbol of revolutionary mass murder. France officially abolished the death penalty in 1981. The last guillotine execution had taken place in 1977, just 2 years before the world got personal computers. Across the Atlantic, a new age of technology brought new ideas about execution. In 1890, the United States became the first country to use the electric chair, when convicted murderer William Kemmler was executed at Auburn Prison in New York. The inventor and advocate of the electric chair was Harold P. Brown, backed by none other than Thomas Edison, who hoped to demonstrate the dangers of his rival George Westinghouse's alternating current. The execution of Kemmler was a catastrophe. The first charge failed to kill him. After a horrified pause, a second charge was applied for over a minute. Witnesses described the smell of burning flesh. A reporter wrote, "They could have done better with an axe." Despite its gruesome introduction, the electric chair became the dominant method of execution in America for most of the 20th century. It was used over 4,300 times. In the latter half of the 20th century, the United States introduced what it considered the most humane method yet: lethal injection. First used in 1982, it involves 3 drugs: a sedative, a paralytic agent, and a drug to stop the heart. It looks, to observers, like a peaceful medical procedure. But its critics argue that, behind the clinical appearance, if the sedative fails, the condemned may experience excruciating pain, completely paralyzed and unable to show it. You have done well to watch midway through this journey across 4,000 years of history, and things are about to get even more revealing. Before we continue, if you're finding this documentary fascinating, please take a moment right now to hit the like button below. It genuinely helps this channel reach more curious minds just like you. And if you haven't already, subscribe to The Fascinating Origin of Things and ring that notification bell. We publish deep dive documentaries just like this regularly. And share this video with someone who loves history. They will thank you for it. Now, let's keep going. Today, our world is profoundly, almost evenly split on the question of state execution. As of the year 2024, 55 countries retain the death penalty and actively use it. 106 countries have abolished it entirely in law. And another 23 countries retain it in law but haven't carried out an execution in over a decade. But the global numbers are deeply distorted by one country above all others: China. By a staggering margin, China executes more people than every other nation on Earth, combined. Human rights organizations estimate that China carries out somewhere between 2,000 and 8,000 executions per year, though the precise number is classified as a state secret. Capital offenses in China include not just murder, but drug trafficking, corruption, and economic crimes. In second place, Iran, which executed at least 834 people in 2023, according to Amnesty International, a number that includes people who were allegedly juveniles at the time of their alleged crimes. Saudi Arabia follows closely, carrying out mass beheadings, sometimes in the dozens on a single day. The United States stands as a unique case in the developed world, the only Western democracy that still regularly carries out executions. And even within the U.S., the picture is fragmented. Capital punishment is legal in 27 states and illegal in 23. The last federal execution before a moratorium was in 2021. Texas alone accounts for over a third of all executions ever carried out in the United States since the reinstatement of capital punishment in 1976. Europe presents a stark contrast. Today, the European Union requires abolition of the death penalty as a condition of membership, meaning that no country can join without eliminating capital punishment. The last country in Western Europe to abolish the death penalty was France in 1981. The last execution in the United Kingdom took place in 1964. And the Council of Europe, which spans 46 nations, has declared the death penalty incompatible with basic human rights. But here is where history takes a fascinating twist. Belarus remains the only country in Europe that still carries out executions. And Russia, suspended from the Council of Europe in 2022, had maintained a moratorium on executions since 1996, though debates about reinstatement have emerged during the Ukraine conflict. Across Africa, the picture is mixed. South Africa abolished the death penalty after the end of apartheid, embedding its prohibition into the post-apartheid constitution in 1995. Nigeria, by contrast, retains it, And in some parts of northern Nigeria, Islamic Sharia law courts have sentenced individuals to death by stoning, sentences that have drawn intense international condemnation. Japan is one of the world's most surprising retentionists. The country carries out executions by hanging, and in a practice considered uniquely cruel by human rights advocates, death row inmates are not informed in advance of their execution date. They can be told only hours, sometimes minutes, before they are taken to the gallows. The psychological torture of not knowing when death will come is considered by many its own form of punishment. Throughout the long history of the death sentence, there are stories so extraordinary that they deserve their own place in the record. In 1947, in the state of Louisiana, a 17-year-old boy named Willie Francis sat in the electric chair for the murder of a local pharmacist. The executioner pulled the lever. The current flowed. Francis convulsed, but he did not die. There had been a malfunction in the portable electric chair. Francis reportedly said, "I am not dead yet." He was returned to his cell. What followed was a landmark legal battle. Francis's lawyers argued that executing him again would constitute cruel and unusual punishment, that he had already, in effect, been punished. The case went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. The court ruled 5-4 against Francis. He was returned to the electric chair in 1947 and executed. Then there is the extraordinary case of John Lee in England in 1885. Lee, convicted of murder, was brought to the gallows 3 separate times. 3 times the trapdoor was tested, and it worked. 3 times John Lee stood on it, and it refused to open. After the 3rd failed attempt, the sheriff stopped the execution. His sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. He served 22 years and was released. He became known forever as the man they could not hang. Perhaps the most powerful argument against the death sentence is the documented reality of wrongful execution. Since 1973, more than 190 people on death row in the United States have been exonerated, their convictions overturned, many through DNA evidence. Researchers estimate that approximately 4% of all death sentences in America are imposed on innocent people. Cameron Todd Willingham was executed in Texas in 2004 for allegedly setting a fire that killed his 3 daughters. Subsequent forensic analysis by independent experts concluded that the fire was not arson at all, that the original investigators had relied on flawed science. Willingham maintained his innocence until the moment of his death. He was executed anyway. The abolition movement is older than many people realize. In 1764, before the United States even existed as a nation, an Italian philosopher named Cesare Beccaria published a groundbreaking work called On Crimes and Punishments. It made a radical argument for its time, that the state had no right to take a life, that the death penalty did not deter crime, and that the purpose of punishment should be rehabilitation, not retribution. Beccaria's ideas would directly influence the founders of the United States, including Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams. Michigan became the first state in the world to abolish the death penalty for ordinary crimes in 1846. The core arguments in the debate have remained remarkably constant across centuries. Proponents of capital punishment argue that some crimes are so horrific that death is the only proportionate response, that it provides closure to victims' families, and that it permanently removes the most dangerous individuals from society. They cite public opinion polls in many countries, showing that significant majorities support its retention for specific crimes, like murder of children or terrorism. Opponents counter that no justice system is infallible, that executing an innocent person is an irreversible error that no court can undo. They point to decades of research showing that the death penalty does not demonstrably reduce murder rates. And they highlight the documented reality that in America and elsewhere, capital punishment has been applied disproportionately to people who are black, poor, or mentally ill, raising profound questions about whether justice is truly blind. The death sentence is not just a legal question. It is a mirror, and what it reflects tells us everything about a society's deepest values. From Hammurabi's stone column to a lethal injection chamber in a modern American prison, the death sentence has traveled an extraordinary distance, and yet the fundamental questions it raises remain unanswered. Is it justice or vengeance? Is it a protection of society or a confession that society has failed? Is it the oldest and most irreducible function of a sovereign state, or the most barbaric relic of a less enlightened age? What history tells us is that no civilization has ever found a permanent answer. Empires that executed freely have collapsed. Democracies that abolished capital punishment have sometimes reinstated it after moments of national crisis. The global trend over the past 70 years has been unmistakably toward abolition. In 1977, only 16 countries had abolished the death penalty. Today, that number has grown to over 100. But the pace has slowed. And in some corners of the world, the tide is quietly turning the other way. 4,000 years ago, a king in Babylon decided that some transgressions were unforgivable. That idea outlasted his empire, outlasted every empire that came after it. It is with us still, carved not in stone perhaps, but in law, in courts, in the solemn machinery of states that still believe that the power over life and death belongs to the government. Whether that belief endures, or whether the next century finally buries it, may be the most important question in the ongoing story of human civilization. And that is the origin of the death sentence, a 4,000-year story that is still being written. If this documentary made you think, if it surprised you, challenged you, or taught you something you didn't know, please give it a like right now. It takes 1 second, and it means the world to this channel. Subscribe if you haven't already, because every week on the fascinating origin of things, we go deep on the histories that shaped the world you live in. And leave your thoughts below at the comments section. Do you think the death penalty is justice or a mistake? I genuinely want to know what you think. I'll see you in the next one.